I'll be honest, ever since my last video, I've been studying Sparxie and Yaoguang very seriously over the past few days. That's also why this video took a bit longer to come out. The limited information about their kits, especially how Elation actually works, honestly confused me even more at first. Well, at least I've moved past that stage now. But even so, there's still a lot to unpack. So before we go any deeper, we need to build a proper foundation. First, we're going to break down the new Elation Mechanic, and then go through how Sparxie and Yaoguang's gameplay function based on V2 data. Only after that will we start theorycrafting future Elation DPS. And the reason is simple. I want all of us to be on the same page first, so when I start making predictions later, you'll clearly understand where I'm coming from. Alright, enough yapping. Let's jump straight into it. To start things off, the Elation Mechanic is actually pretty simple. As long as you have at least one Elation character in your party, you'll see Aha appear in the turn order. You can think of Aha a lot like Jingyuan's Lightning Lord. It functions in a very similar way. But before we go any further, we need to introduce some new Elation terminology, because, yeah, there's quite a lot of it. Don't worry though, I'll explain everything step by step as we go. We'll start with the first piece of terminology, Punchline. At the start of a battle, at least from how it currently works, if you have any Elation characters on your team, you immediately gain Punchline points based on how many Elation characters you have. Specifically, you get 10 Punchline points per Elation character. So, for example, if you're running Sparxie and Yaoguang as your two Elation characters, that's 2 times 10, giving you 20 Punchline points on both Sparxie and Yaoguang at the start of the fight. Now, you might be asking, what exactly are Punchline points used for? The answer is simple. Elation damage scales with the amount of Punchline you have. We'll get into the damage scaling first. Based on the formula and the graph I'll show in a moment, Elation damage increases as your Punchline increases, but it doesn't scale infinitely. From my calculations, diminishing returns start kicking in at around 200 or more Punchline. Because of that, the optimal range to aim for is roughly 100 to 150 Punchline points per character. At this point, you might ask another question. How do we actually accumulate Punchline points in the first place? For now, there's only one way to increase character Punchline, and that's through Aha Instant. So, what exactly is Aha Instant? You already know that Aha takes its own turn. When Aha takes that turn, that moment is called Aha Instant. But what does it actually do? To understand that, we need to take a small step back. Whenever an Elation character uses a basic attack, skill, or ultimate, they generate Punchline. However, this Punchline doesn't go directly to the character. Instead, it goes into Aha first. To avoid confusion, let's split Punchline into two types. Character Punchline, the Punchline your characters personally have, Aha Punchline, the Punchline stored inside Aha. At the start of the battle, Aha Punchline usually starts at 0, unless an Elation character has an ability that changes this. This is different from Character Punchline, which starts at 10 times the number of Elation characters on your team. Now, let's use an example. Assume all your Elation characters have already used their basic attack, skill, or ultimate, spent their turns, and together generated 50 Aha Punchline points. Then Aha gets its turn, and Aha Instant happens. When Aha Instant occurs, 3 effects happen in sequence. The first effect is that Aha Instant immediately triggers the Elation skill on all Elation characters. This is not their normal skill, it's a special follow-up attack exclusive to Elation characters. The Elation damage dealt by this skill scales entirely based on the Aha Punchline you've accumulated. So it's important to remember that this damage scales from Aha Punchline, not from Character Punchline. The second effect is the conversion of Punchline. All of the stored Aha Punchline is consumed and added directly into Character Punchline. For example, if Aha Instant triggers while Aha Punchline is at 50 and Character Punchline is at 20, Aha Punchline will be reduced to 0 and Character Punchline will increase to 70. At this point, you might start asking yourself, why do I need to stack so much Punchline if it's only being used for the Aha Instant Elation skill? And that question leads directly into the third effect. The third effect gives all Elation characters a status called Certified Banger. Remember, for every Elation character we know so far, at least in the cases of Yaoguang and Sparxie, Their talent has a special effect that activates while they're in the certified banger state. In Sparxie's case, it adds additional elation damage to her basic attack. In Yaoguang's case, it adds additional elation damage to her follow-up attack. And since this elation damage also scales with character Punchline, the extra Punchline gained from Aha Punchline will naturally translate into even more damage for both Sparxie and Yaoguang. One important thing to remember though, these additional character Punchline points only last for 2 turns. So yes, there's definitely some min-maxing involved here. So based on V2 data, Elation gameplay with 2 characters, assuming you use Yaoguang and Sparxie, will be like these. At the start of the battle, all Elation characters begin with 20 character Punchline, while Aha Punchline starts at 0. From there, your Elation characters take their turns as usual. Every time they use a basic attack, skill, or ultimate, they generate Punchline that is stored inside Aha, gradually building up Aha Punchline. For example, after a full round of actions, you might accumulate around 50 Aha Punchline points. Once Aha gets its turn, Aha Instant is triggered. When this happens, all Elation units immediately activate their Elation skill, dealing damage that scales with the Aha Punchline that was just accumulated. After that, Aha applies the Certified Banger status to all Elation characters, enabling the special talent effects tied to that state. Next, Aha consumes all of its stored Aha Punchline and converts it directly into character Punchline. With this conversion complete, the turn cycle returns to your characters. Now, they can take advantage of both the Certified Banger state and the extra character Punchline they gained, resulting in noticeably higher Elation damage during their actions. At the same time, as your Elation characters continue attacking, they once again begin generating Aha Punchline, setting up the next Aha turn. When Aha acts again, Aha Instant triggers once more, and the entire sequence repeats. And that's essentially the core loop. Elation gameplay, as it currently stands, is a cycle of building Aha Punchline, detonating it through Aha Instant, converting it into character Punchline, and then capitalizing on that power during the Certified Banger window, over and over again until the battle ends. Now that we've covered the basics of the Elation mechanic and how it works, let's briefly talk about Sparxie and Yaoguang's gameplay within an Elation team, especially their interaction with Aha. I want to keep this section very brief and general, since everything we have right now comes from leaks and leaked gameplay videos. Because of that, I don't want to go too deep into specific kit details. Just keep in mind that everything here is based on V2 data. Starting with Sparxie, her role in an Elation team is fairly straightforward. Her main mechanic, at least so far, is to generate as much Aha Punchline as possible by using her skill, even if that means sacrificing skill points. Then, after Aha Instant, when Sparxie enters the Certified Banger state, she gains an additional buff to her basic attack. This buff scales directly with how much character Punchline Sparxie has. In short, it's a very classic DPS setup. More Punchline equals more damage. Now moving on to Yaoguang. Her most unique mechanic is the ability to trigger Aha Instant early using her ultimate, before Aha even gets its normal turn. When Yaoguang activates her ultimate, it immediately triggers Aha Instant, but unlike the normal version, the Aha Punchline is fixed at 20 based on V2 data. So, for example, if you start with 20 character Punchline, using Yaoguang's ultimate will immediately push that up to 40, even before Aha's turn begins. Beyond that, Yaoguang's main role is to support the Elation team. She provides additional Elation damage buffs, res pen buffs for the whole team, and, most importantly, contributes significant damage through her follow-up attacks, which also scale with Elation damage. To sum it all up, in the bigger picture, Sparxie is primarily designed to act as an Aha Punchline generator, while Yaoguang, although not as efficient at generating Punchline, brings broader utility by supporting the entire Elation team with buffs and follow-up attacks. So now that we understand the basics of the Elation mechanic along with Sparxie and Yaoguang, the big question becomes, what does all of this mean for future Elation DPS? Based on how these two characters are designed, I think there are at least 3 possible directions Elation DPS could take in the future. So let's go through them one by one. Option 1, Team Damage. Let's start with the most obvious option. Team-based damage Elation DPS. By this, I mean an Elation DPS that functions similarly to how Anaxa works with the Herda. We already see a version of this with Sparxie and Yaoguang, where Sparxie effectively acts as the main damage dealer while Yaoguang supports her. However, with only 2 Elation units, the team still feels incomplete. If this is the direction Hoyoverse is aiming for, I'd expect at least one more Elation sub DPS and one Elation sustain unit to be released to fully flesh out the archetype. As a complete prototype, this kind of Elation team would likely deal damage comparable to a Castery style team, based on how the Elation mechanic works overall. That said, at its core, this option is essentially just a Remembrance team reskinned as Elation. It's not particularly unique, and honestly, I don't think it would be very fun to play. This setup is about as traditional as it gets, very similar to how classic the Herta teams functioned in the early 3.x meta. Option 2. Hypercarry Elation. I arrived at this conclusion because I kept asking myself one thing. Yes, the more punchline you have, the more Elation damage you deal. That part is absolutely true. However, the way the scaling works means that after a certain point, the games start to slow down. Around 150 punchline and beyond, you're still getting more damage, but each additional point gives less value than before. So while triggering Aha Instant more often does increase damage, the question becomes whether that extra punchline is being used efficiently. And that naturally leads to another question. What should we do with excess punchline once we're already past the optimal range? My answer is simple. You create an Elation DPS that actively consumes character punchline, either to deal damage directly or to enable a powerful ultimate. Imagine a scenario where, after an Aha Instant, every Elation character in the party has at least 50 character punchline, including the main DPS. With 4 Elation units, that's a combined 200 total character punchline across the team. Now imagine an Elation DPS that can absorb all of that punchline at once and convert it into a single ultimate state or ultimate attack. Since the damage would scale off the total character punchline from all Elation characters, the scaling potential would be massive, even if individual characters are already past the point of diminishing returns. This design naturally fits a hypercarry setup, which I personally prefer. That said, because this playstyle requires careful timing and setup, it probably wouldn't be very friendly for autoplay players. Option 3. Aha Burst Damage. The third option is Aha Burst Damage. Options 1 and 2 both focus on damage that comes directly from the characters themselves, but what if the main source of damage comes from Aha instead? If you've played Reverse 1999, you'll probably understand what I'm getting at here. The core idea of this team would be to deal as much damage as possible during Aha Instant by repeatedly triggering Elation skills from all characters at once. In other words, the entire team's damage window is centered around Aha Instant activations, not individual character turns. Because of that, any character that can trigger Aha Instant more frequently without having to wait for Aha's natural turn would be extremely valuable. Yaoguang already does a good job here, but ideally you'd want either a character that massively buffs team speed, or a character that can trigger Aha Instant repeatedly, even more often than Yaoguang. One of the most interesting parts of this setup is that you might not even need to build crit damage at all. Instead, your entire focus would be on Elation damage and speed. In that sense, this playstyle is very similar to Super Break teams. On top of that, a team like this would be very easy to autoplay, which makes it extremely attractive as a general farming team. So yeah, that's essentially how the Elation mechanic works, and how I think future Elation DPS could be designed, based on the information we have up to V2. Because all of the options I mentioned really only function optimally in a 4 Elation unit setup, I want to say this again. Even though Yaoguang and Sparxie look like solid units so far, it's probably not wise to pull for them just yet. At least, not before an Elation DPS is officially confirmed. If you really want to pull for them, that's totally fine, but at the very least, I'd recommend waiting until we get leaks or information about the Elation DPS, and then making your decision from there. That way, you'll know exactly what kind of team you should be investing in. And with that, I think that covers all of my theories on future Elation DPS. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about the future of Elation DPS? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who's also interested in Elation theory crafting. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.